Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a real uphill climb when I put Clint Eastwood's The Eiger Sanction against Renny Harlin's Cliffhanger. And this one was a real hard one to pick because both of these movies are on kind of the same level of mid. So let's just dive right on into the nit and the picky here. First up, we have Clint Eastwood's The Eiger Sanction, which is kind of a spy thriller type thing. You know, he kind of plays a part similar to like Indiana Jones. He's an art professor that also happens to be an assassin for a secret government organization and stuff. And he's quit doing that, but then they contact him again to pull off a job to avenge the death of an agent that went down in the field that was also a really good friend of Clint Eastwood's character, Hemlock, as he's called in the film. So, and the guy that runs the secret government organization is named Dragon, and that dude is an albino, which was a weird trope that they would have in the 70s. Like random like albino characters would just pop up in movies and stuff. Another notable one would be Hustle, the albino interrogation scene. But the guy playing the albino, I don't really remember who he was. I've never really seen him in anything else or nothing that I would have recognized him in, but he's playing that part brilliantly. He hams it up just enough to like be that kind of scene chomping villain, but at the same time he kind of plays it off with a style and grace, and Clint Eastwood is in top form in this film. I think this is one of the best efforts I've ever seen of him, where he's trying to imitate one of his mentors, Don Siegel, as a director, because at the center of this, like a whole theme of this kind of movie, is the kind of shit that like Don Siegel would have made. It's kind of got little echoes of Black Windmill and stuff, and honestly, like it's probably should have been like his follow-up to Black Windmill, but instead we get Clint Eastwood in the director's chair, and even at this point he was still like fresh as a director. He was finding his voice, but his lines in this movie are really hilarious. All the shit that he does. He's kind of a sleaze a bit, but he's also got principles, but he doesn't overstate them like he does in something like The Gauntlet or any of that other bullshit. And then of course, so he's tasked to like take out this dude, basically the title of the film, The Eiger Sanction. He's got to take out this guy on a mountain called the Eiger, and he tried to climb it like twice and failed. And so like at the end of the day, it's not just a revenge ride. He's also got to kind of prove something to himself, and then so he gets help from his friend played by George Kennedy to help him like get back in shape to climb a mountain. And honestly, that's some of the most fun that you have in the movie, is when the stuff between Clint Eastwood and George Kennedy. Of course, George Kennedy, one of the greatest character actors of all time, he could really like add a layer of class to a picture and stuff. And it's got some really great action sequences, on top of the fact that the cinematography for like the mountain climbing sequences are just exhilarating. Like it's breathtaking even, because like you really feel like you're right up there on this mountain, and just the depth and the fucking like how high they are. You really just feel that. You almost like feel the fucking altitude change in a way, because there's a lot of like long shots, and it's very edited in a way that like it intercuts conversation with nature, and to a brilliant point. It really like it tries to show you the fucking landscape. It doesn't really like care so much about the people, in a way. Like this movie is low key brilliant because it's like the insignificance of the people is really like, because everything, the way it all turns out, it's like everybody's like fucking over everybody. One of like we see that like the only one that ain't really like fucked off in that sense is Clint Eastwood's character Hemlock. He really ain't fucking nobody over. He's just trying to live his life, collect his art, and teach a bunch of people that don't give a shit about art. He's like got a principles. He turns down the student that's trying to fuck him for an A, and all that other shit, and then but there's weird shit too. A lot of Clint Eastwood movies of this time, a lot of gay jokes in it. There's that character that's his enemy, Miles something, and then he's clearly a little flamboyant. He's got a dog that he's named Faggot, and that's a running joke in the film. And he's got a big bodyguard that Clint Eastwood like whoops his ass. So another trope of a Clint Eastwood movie, and this was still early on in that, he had probably only really been like a bankable action star for about a decade at this point when this movie was made. So he's still trying to find not only his voice as a director, but as an action star. But like all the tropes that would be synonymous with a Clint Eastwood movie do pop up here, you know. And he does pull like some incredible ass. At the very, very lovely Vanette McKee in it, you know. She's brilliant as Jemima. Jemima Brown, I think is her name. You know, there's a lot of shit that he plays around with, but not as overtly racist and sleazy as some of his other pictures, like the Dirty Harry film. But like I said, the action in it is really great too. And like even when that they finally climb the Eiger, and it's like who really is the killer and stuff. Honestly, the killer reveal is kind of lame, but in a sense, it's like, you know, that kind of paranoid thriller of the 70s where it's like you can't even really trust your friends. It turns out George Kennedy's the guy that he's been hunting this whole time, but he's also been the only motherfucker on his side, you know. And it's like nature ends up killing these motherfuckers, you know, and then Clint Eastwood gets out unscathed as he usually did in a film, you know, and when, especially like when he's hanging from that thing, it's fucking like it's just intense, you know. It has a certain intensity that you don't get from films sometimes, you know, and it's low-key brilliant, you know. It's not like all in your face, you know. We move forward to Cliffhanger, directed by Renny Harlin, which is very much in your face, you know. From that opening sequence, it's just like, it starts out all like, you know, fun sounding and shit like a fucking TV movie, and then like it just goes into, you know, the fucking woman falls, and then that sets up the whole like internal conflict, because like that, just like Clint Eastwood has like certain tropes for his movies, Stallone definitely has those too. And like even by this point in his career, he was still like in peak form and stuff, and so maybe the prime of his career, but it was like most of the actors that were still going in the 90s, this was kind of their downswing. But of course he co-wrote the script, and you know, all his dialogue too is great in the film, much like he knew how to make himself say what he could say and deliver it properly. He's not good at like delivering like heavy lines. He's not gonna do any Shakespearean soliloquies, but he can like might have like one or two more emotions than Clint Eastwood, you know, especially like the yelling and screaming. You know, you believe that this motherfucker is genuinely confused sometimes too, but can also play tough. But you know, that sets it up to where like then you got like a group, it's like Robbins, the Treasury thing, and then now that plane heist, there's some great fucking action sequences, of course, like Renny Harlin, one of the greatest action directors of all time, and like that plane heist sequence, you know, is pretty badass, you know. And then of course they end up crash landing, so now they're stranded on this mountain. And of course, like, you got Michael Rooker, who was the boyfriend of the woman that fell to her death at the beginning of the film. He of course blames Stallone's character. Stallone of course blames himself. And I forget the woman's name that plays Stallone's woman, Jessie, in the film. But, you know, she's just wanting them to all get over their own fucking bullshit, you know. But in a way, they all kind of got to come together to defeat these fucking thieves and shit, you know. They're not even terrorists. They're just trying to find their fucking stolen money and shit, you know. And, of course, John Lithgow as the villain is, like, pretty fucking lame, you know. Whatever fucking accent that he's doing in the film is annoying as shit. It's a movie that starts out so fucking strong, but then just keeps getting more annoying. It's a weird fucking thing. Like, the more I watch Cliffhanger, the more it pisses me off, because it's like half a great movie. Of course, you got these great action sequences from Renny Harlin, you know, like they blow up the little drawbridge and shit, and then like the fucking he's riding that dude down the fucking mountain with like a fucking sled and shit. That's fucking insane. And then when Michael Rooker pops that dude with the shotgun off that cliff and shit, like, there's moments of greatness in this, but some of the fucking henchmen are just downright laughable, you know, like fucking like rejects from a Michael Bay film and shit. And, you know, like I said, of course, John Lithgow, fucking annoying as hell. Like, and he's the one leading the pack, and you got to listen to him say the most predictable lines that I've ever fucking heard in a movie. Like, honestly, at this point is when like Stallone was kind of recycling shit that he did in the late 70s and all through the 80s and stuff. So I really got to give this one to the Eiger Sanction, because like, all in all, it's a better movie. Like, the ending may be lame as fuck, but it's still not as lame as like how like Cliffhanger is. I mean, like, how many times even at that point in cinema had we seen like the bad guy die falling from a fucking helicopter or some shit, or just blowing up? You know, it's just fucking, even in like the early 90s when this was made, it was still a fucking like overused trope. Whereas like even in the Eiger Sanction, it's almost like nature, like human nature and actual nature kill these motherfuckers because they're like so, like, they think they know more than, they think they're better than everybody else, but you can't outsmart nature of any fucking kind, you know. So for anybody keeping score, that's 53-45. 70s are up by 8. That lead continues to grow. It was a big surprise. Like I said, both of these movies are on the same level. I would argue that the fucking mountain climbing shit is filmed that they're honestly, I don't really think one's better than the other. Other than I may say, I may even like lean that towards the Eiger Sanction because you actually feel like you're there. With fucking Cliffhanger, it almost feels like they could be on a soundstage at some point, but there's not a moment in the Eiger Sanction where you don't think that's real. And of course, you know, I will say that it shouldn't be a deciding factor, but there's way more tits in the Eiger Sanction as well. You know, a lot of fucking, like, Eastwood gets to be a swinging spy and shit. You know, I guess instead, since he never got to play James Bond, you know, they offered that shit to him at one point. So he's, in a way, he gets to kind of play with the role and have fun with it, where it's like, you know, Stallone's like whole brooding thing gets kind of old and annoying, you know, and even like some of the action with him is pretty mid, you know, like then all the mountain climbing shit. So if I said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. This is all a rough draft to a doctoral thesis. You know, I think Renny Harlin is a better director than Clint Eastwood as far as action goes, but I feel like with the Eiger Sanction, it's just a better movie. It's one of those you kind of watch it more. The more you watch it, the more you see shit you didn't see before, and it really like has a lot of layers that you wouldn't expect from a basic ass film like this, you know. And whereas like, yeah, Cliffhanger keeps getting shittier every time I watch it. So 53-45, 70s up by 8. Stay tuned for more of these. We'll keep doing that. This has been a main event round. It's only getting more exciting.